Welcome to the IDP Center podcast. Hope you guys are ready tonight. We're going to do streamers. We're going to talk about trends. We're going to talk about Thursday Night Football. You guys know me. I'm the IDP Hunter. I'm over there on Twitter. I'm over there at the Fantasy Six Pack. I do the Waiver Wire article. I'm over on the IDP Center. I do the Defensive Lineman Star of the Week. And I'm also over on the RPO Network, where I do the Every Down Linebacker. We'll get into some of those details as we go. I'm also an ECR ranker. Currently on Fantasy Pros. Currently, right now, as of right now, I am ranked 6th as a defensive IDP guy. So there's a little bit of a race. I'm in the top 6. I got some good guests with me tonight to help me with this. I got Jamie Perogue from Going for Two Live. He's my co-host. He does the Sunday Sit Start show. He does the Sunday show and the Going for Two as well, right, Jamie?
Yeah, and Tuesday night cheat sheet.
And then also the cheat sheet. And then also you do, it's a really neat article he does. He does the wide receiver cornerbacks matchups where he breaks down each wide receiver and cornerback. He breaks it down. He breaks it down what they had for dinner last week, what the color of the weather is outside, if they're in a dome or not. Really fascinating article. Guys, check that out. Maybe we'll compare some of that tonight. We talk about Thursday night. But before we get into that, I want to talk about our guest. Our guest, Mr. JT Brew. How you doing, sir? How you doing?
Doing fantastic. You know, just another week of football life.
Let me tell the audience about JT Brew, okay? Good friend of mine. He's on FantasyInFrames. He co-hosts a show called the Stew with JT Brew, okay? He does Dynasty evaluation, shoot the gap. He even does hockey. He's a Scott Fishbowl enthusiast. But his favorite accolade out of all of that stuff I just mentioned, his favorite thing on the resume, he's a football coach. He is currently 6-0, undefeated in his conference for youth football. How you doing, my friend?
I'm great. Actually, here I got the old ring from us going undefeated this season. Or for my fifth grade team, I used to coach high school football until my son was born, and now that he's up to that tackle football age, I got to coach him this year, assistant head coach and defensive coordinator. I used to coach the defense coordinator in high school as well. So I'm pumped to be back in it. I do flag football with him after regular football season. And then I'm the offensive coordinator in flag, because you pretty much just play man defense in flag football. But I love it, man. Love coaching, love teaching the kids the game. And, you know, I love defense, man. I love to mix it up, run blitzes, throw in the coverages, kind of throw things off. So I love that.
It's got to be really rewarding. It's got to be really rewarding to be teaching kids at the youth level, like where to stand, how to defensive strategize. Because, you know, I imagine on that level, you know, the offense is a little bit ahead sometimes.
Yeah, it's fun because, like, a lot of these kids, you know, they got video games, which is, I learned a lot when I was a kid playing video games. So, like, they've got the games and they know how to play the offense because they're used to doing that. But, like, learning the defensive strategy, they play video games, but they don't really know how they're supposed to be calling plays and what they're doing.
Right.
So, teaching the kids, like, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm going to call this call because I want to try to make the offense do this, or I want to see how they're going to react, and then we're going to run this play later. And they're like, oh, and just seeing those light bulbs go off in their head, they start understanding why we're doing what we're doing. Instead of, you know, I grew up with a lot of coaches that I had some great coaches of the year, but I had some coaches that were just like, do this because I said so. And they were never they never were like telling you why they wanted you to do that. They were just like, do it. And, you know, and I always feel like, for me, I'm one of those guys that, like, once I know why I'm doing it, it makes a whole lot more sense to me, you know?
Exactly.
And so that's what I try to teach the kids is this is what you're looking for. Just like my flag football guys, a lot of kids will just go back there, run around, everybody screams their name, and then they just throw to somebody. And I'm like, in the huddle, I'm like, all right, here's your first read is the deep post. Second read's going to be the crossing route. Third read's going to be the running back out of the backfield. Like, and then, like, watching those kids, like, actually read and, like, figure out what they're supposed to do and then go in order. It's so cool compared to when it was like, you know, second, third grade, they're just literally everyone's just screaming their name and they're just throwing the ball up in the air. And it's like they're playing 300.
You know, two things I kind of want to ask you on this show is maybe we can kind of cut into that a little bit. Maybe we can talk about tech positions, how we start the kids, because that'd be kind of fun to have a football coach on. Jamie, I'm not a football coach. I'm a defensive guy. I watch tape. I do this, but I'm very jealous and I'm excited and congratulations to your team. What's the name of the team? What's the mascot? What's the logo?
We're the Bulldogs, Mahoney-Seymour Bulldogs. We're in Central Illinois, just outside of Champaign. So it's my alma mater. Live back in my hometown, where I grew up, and so we've got a youth football program. And I tell you what, I saw my son this year. I go, man, you guys have nicer uniforms and equipment than we had my senior year of high school for 5th grade football. It's wild. It's nice. Yeah. We've got a really nice community, people, donating money, paying into the program, and stuff like that. So we've got some real nice stuff, and it's awesome. I always tell people used to think I was crazy. I was like, man, you look good, you play good. If you feel good about your equipment, you look good in your uni, you come in confident. And I was always one of those people who was big on uniforms. I remember people being like, what does it matter? And I'm like, it matters, man. It matters to me. And now as these kids are getting older and they're seeing all the different jerseys and unis with Nike and Under Armour and everything else, I think it matters, man. More than people realize.
You know what you just reminded me of? If you remember, I don't know how far you go back, the Patriots had those ugly Patriot, the old logo. As soon as they switched to the flag, September 11th happened. What did they do? They won a Super Bowl, right? Yep. 49ers were similar. They got a new uniform in the 90s. I remember the Bucks changed. You're right. There's something to that. When the Rams, when they move a city or if they change their uniform, I got to watch what I say. When I say move a city, the Browns fan over there, Jamie Perot, kind of cringes. He's like, don't talk about the move in the cities. But I think
man. And when the Browns got new uniforms, we still sucked.
Did you get the new uniforms though? I'm trying to understand what changed in those uniforms.
They get new uniforms, but the new ones were worse. Yeah, the new ones were worse. Actually, I did when they even went the new ones. I was like, how are you making these worse? But they somehow did. I'm a big fan of the old unis, man. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I don't mind if something that says a team name, but to me, that's high school and college. Like, I don't like the Cleveland across the front. I don't like the big L. Like, I don't mind patches and stuff, but I just don't like the big names on the uniforms for NFL. I like the patches and the logos. I'm an old school guy. Whenever they do the throwbacks, I'm in heaven. I love the throwback nights. Throwback jerseys. I'm a Steelers fan, so like when they do the blackout all Steelers like color rush jerseys from old, those I love those ones. The all black pants, back jerseys, just the yellow numbers and yellow stripe. Those are like my absolute favorites. So,
what about the Bumblebee?
Jamie, that's what I was going to ask.
Man, the Bumblebee ones are rough. I understand what they were trying to do with them. I don't think the execution was very good on those ones, though.
That's funny, man. Yeah, I was going to ask you guys your favorite jerseys. I remember the ugliest one has to be the Eagles. They have like a Swedish colored one. It was like their first throwback. I was like, what? How is this? This isn't Kelly Green. What is this? But yeah, any preferences, favorite jerseys out there or throwbacks?
Oh man, I really like, and now they're all the time jerseys, but I love the powder blue Chargers unis. Like when I was a kid, they were the navy blue and the yellow, and then when they went to throwback, they wore the powder blue with the white helmets, which I just love. I think those with the yellow pants, I think that's just a great combination of uniform. I think they're awesome. I like the Kelly Green Eagles. I think when they wear the Kelly Green throwbacks are sweet. I was a Randall Cunningham fan growing up. I got an old Randall Cunningham signed helmet. So I love the old ones there. They're like even the old Broncos. I love the old Broncos with the D on the helmet and the horse. There was one year they wore a throwback and a lot of people didn't like it, but it was an orange helmet with like a bucking kind of crazy looking white Bronco. It was a little more of a caricature. I thought it was awesome though. They haven't worn those ones very often, but I thought those was great. But I'm a sucker for uniforms in general. I mean, even the Patriots, and I'm not a Patriots guy because they've beaten the Steelers and Colts way too many times in my life for my liking. But I like the Pat the Patriot white helmet with the red uni. I love the old school Falcons throwbacks, the black ones from the 90s, but I love the white, red and silvers from the 80s are sweet. So I know you said one uniform, but I'll talk about uniforms all day long. I love uniforms.
So I'll kick it off to Jamie. We're going to do a little bit about some streams. We're going to be fishing up a lake. We're going to be doing the streaming. Waivers have ended, my friend. Waivers are gone. So we're going to be pretty much throwing dart throws the rest of this episode, what have you. So Jamie, you're up the lake. You're up a lake fishing. What do we got on the offense, my friend?
I'll start with quarterbacks. I got a few. Nobody seems to want Daniel Jones on their team, even though he's been killing it lately. He's facing the Panthers this week. He's also got the number one quarterback schedule for the rest of the season. Plus, he's got that rushing upside. So why is Daniel Jones not on any of our teams still? And of course, this is for single quarterback leagues. Obviously, super flex, nobody's available. But Aaron Rodgers this week, he's facing the Cardinals. Seems like a good matchup. And Russell Wilson, not bad. He's going against the Commanders, I believe, right? So yeah, they've been better lately, but still you could pass on them. For my running backs, these are more stashes. It's that like next man up situation. Tyler Algier needs to be rostered. He's still got that standalone value. Plus, if something happens to Bijan, he's going to be a beast. He can help you win championships. Other stashes, you got Braylon Allen, Ray Davis, Trey Benson, Khalil Herbert. Now that Khalil Herbert's gone, Roshan Johnson. You need Roshan on your team now because if something happens,
I heard
that's the guy, man. So with receivers, I don't know which one, but it's going to be Juwan Jennings or Ricky Pearsall. Pick one, pick both. I don't know. But Jalen Tolbert, now that there's the injury to CeeDee Lamb, I know they just traded for Mingo, but I still see Jalen Tolbert being the guy. I think it was week 5. He had that 10 target game. CeeDee Lamb's getting 10.5 targets per game. Now that he's gone, I can see Jalen Tolbert stepping up. He's got that 22-point upside like he had in week 5. Then you got Xavier Legette. I know we don't like Bryce Young, but you still need Xavier Legette on your team, man. He's going to get those targets. Quentin Johnson, he's that boom or bust type guy. And then one of my favorites from last year's rookie draft, late round guys, Parker Washington. The dude played like 70% in the slot last year. This year, he's playing like 70% on the outside. So he's got that versatility. We know Christian Kirk's out. He could play that slot. And if one of Gabe Davis or Brian Thomas goes out, he could also play on the outside. For tight ends, Hunter Henry, why is he only 40% owned still? Get him on your team, man. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Another guy is Jonnu Smith, could be a streamer. Theo Johnson's been getting a little play lately. Same with Jatavian Sanders. But my favorite, Taysom Hill. That dude is getting like snaps at quarterback. He's getting snaps at running back. He saw the second highest snaps at wide receiver, I believe, last week. So he's just going everywhere. So you need to get him rostered. He's got that upside, especially with that team in shambles. Like they're just going to use him and Kamara all day long. So get him on your roster. And that's pretty much it.
So Jamie and JT, I was going to ask you guys, a couple trades went down. You know, we had Marshawn Lattimore go to Commanders. Okay. Corner. Okay, whatever. Jonathan Mingo went to the Cowboys. I don't even know what to take of that. I'll let you guys process that. Mike Williams to the Steelers. Okay. And then last your aforementioned Kylie Herbert, the Bengals. Any of that you want? You mentioned you like Herbert, but is there anything you're targeting there? Anything interesting? Any of that I said?
I've got a ton of Chase Brown, so I'm going to try to get Khalil Herbert. If he's off on a waiver, I want to get him on that team to back up because he's going to see some touches. I don't think it's going to be 100% Chase Brown, but I think Chase is going to get most of the work going forward. But again, if he gets hurt, it immediately becomes clear Herbert there. So I definitely on Herbert. I know Jamie said Ray Davis. Ray Davis is my guy. I still can't believe he's not in more leagues. If anything happens with Cook, he's immediately like RB2, RB1 upside on that team.
Right.
So I'm all over that. Fantasy purposes, I don't know if it's going to help you a ton, but I do like the move for the Steelers to get Mike Williams. I mean, he's an upgrade over Van Jefferson. If he can stay healthy, obviously they've got Calvin Austin, but it's like, man, you need that big Mike Williams body to go get those deep balls from Russ because they want to run play action and deep. So I like it. I don't know. I don't know if he's really going to give you a lot in fantasy. That one's going to be a toughie. But the other one I like, this is the one Jamie, the ones he was saying I like. The other one, still Mike Gesicki. He's out there in a ton of leagues. Whenever Higgins doesn't play, he seems to play well. When Higgins comes back, he seems to absolutely disappear for the Bengals.
Yeah.
So Higgins this week. So it's like there's a shot against going against the Ravens that I'm probably going to play him in a couple spots. So he's a guy on. If you're like in a deep league and you're like desperation mode and you're trying to look and go like, who do I pick up? Like I got to get somebody that's playable. Nick Westbrook Inky from the Titans is getting a decent amount of looks. He's not a sexy play. It's not a guy I would say like play normally, but like I'm in some 14 and 16 team leagues where we start like 11, 12 guys. And I'm like, some weeks, like I got a guy that's going to get me something, at least some kind of upside. He's a guy that I'm picking up in those types of leagues and playing this week.
Yeah, I like that Gesicki call. I actually have him on a lot of rosters, and in some weeks I have to start him on flex just because it's such deep rosters, like start 11, start 12. The only thing that worries me, he was only played like 34% of snaps.
Oh yeah, he's boom or bust. I agree with you, man. He's boomer. He's one of those guys. Throw him in the lineup. You're like, am I going to get 15 out of him, or I'm going to get 0? Like you just don't know what he's going to do for you week to week. So you're always taking a chance with Gesicki.
Yeah, but I mean, he has been getting targets when he is on the field, so that is a plus.
My problem with Gesicki is every time I see him make a heroic catch on red zone, because I watch a lot of games of red zone, I'm like, wow, yeah, good for you. And I look at the points, he's got like 2 points or 4 points or 6 points. I don't ever it doesn't translate to my fantasy game, you know? So
he's had a couple bigger games. He's had a couple bigger games this year, but they're like few and far between. Again, he's one of those guys that's like, if you're desperate at tight end because, you know, your guy's on a bye or somebody's hurt because there's not a lot of good tight ends out there right now. You know, he did have a monster game last week, 5 catches, 100 yards, 2 touches. So he was the number 1 tight end last week. So he had a big week. And then, like you said, Taysom Hill, and people dropped him for some reason because he was hurt. He's a nice pickup. Juwan Johnson also, if you're in a deeper league, whenever Derek Carr plays, it seems like he gets more action. And now with Olave out with a concussion, I think you're going to see a little more Juwan Johnson. So he's another guy in deeper leagues that I'm throwing in my lineup if I don't have an extra flex spot.
Because when they're playing Taysom Hill in the backfield or at quarterback or out wide or in the slot, Juwan Johnson's like he's going to be in that tight end position. So I do like that.
You mentioned Carr, and I was going to actually do this for trends, but I'll just put it out to y'all now. Usually Black Friday is when we wait for coaches to get fired, right? There's a carousel. There's a whole thing. That's a new trend right now going on. Dennis Allen is gone. And you know what's funny? He was gone with the Raiders when Carr was there. So maybe Carr is the reason. I don't know. I'm joking. Maybe he got fired. And speaking of the Raiders lost an offense coordinator, an offensive line coach, cornerback coach again. Yikes. But those pink slips are coming, aren't they, Jamie and JT?
Yeah, I mean, this is the 4th time in the past 5 years that the Raiders have switched coordinators or head coaches in the middle of a season. So, like, that makes me happy as a Browns fan that seeing a team that's more dysfunctional than the Cleveland.
Yeah, it's been wild. It's like teams are getting faster and faster. They're, you know, grabbing the hook, you know, but it's crazy. My main thing is like, if you were trying to get out ahead of other guys, as far as like trying to hire guys, I can understand it a little bit, but it's like, if these guys are coaching on other teams, they can't really come. I'm not up to date on all the coaching rules as far as like when you're allowed to talk to a guy and when you're not, or how much during the season, but it wouldn't think you would be getting that much of an advantage as getting rid of a guy early. But also you see these teams that struggle. It's because they keep firing their coaches all the time. Sometimes you got to give guys a couple years to like figure it out and get something put together and get a routine. Like, yeah, they might suck for a while, but you got to give them a chance. Just these guys are getting rid of guys in 6 games or a year into their contract. It's like, man, it's like, well, of course they can't get it together. They're already got hired because you're a bad team. And then you expect their team to get turned around in like 2 seconds. It kills me. I'm like, guys, got to have, that's the one thing. as a Steelers fan, for all the hate that Mike Tomlin gets from people sometimes, I'm like, man, you guys don't understand. Having like that consistency is so huge. And I think people just get spoiled. They're like, oh, I've won a playoff game forever. I'm like, but you've been in the playoffs. How many teams haven't been in the playoffs? Like, people get spoiled and they think, oh, well, we haven't won a championship in X amount of years. I'm like, how many teams have never won a championship? How many teams have only been there one time? So it's like, you got to keep things in perspective. But sometimes I am in like, yeah, you got to fire this guy. Like, you just got to make a move, make a change. But some of these teams, I just think they just are perpetually changing coordinators and perpetually changing head coaches because they just can't figure it out themselves.
Yeah. So with Dennis Allen, though, his record on the team is 18 wins, 25 losses, no playoff appearances. He had his 7th straight loss, which is the highest or the longest losing streak since 1999 for the Saints.
Oh wow!
Oh, man. He set himself up because they looked so good the first 2 weeks. Yeah. And then when they started bottoming out, it was just like everybody was like, "What? I thought they were gonna be good." And I was one of those people that was like, "Man, are the Saints actually gonna be decent this year?" Because I was like, I think they're gonna have a good defense. I was like, the division sucks. They can probably go like 500 and maybe win the division. And then they came out like gangbusters in the first 2 games, and I was like, "Dang, is this team actually going to be good?" And then I was like, "Oh, this was the Saints team I was more expecting to see this year." I didn't think they would lose 7 in a row, but injuries obviously have piled up for them and hurt them. But I was like, I did not think this was going to be a good team this year.
Any other offensive players, guys? I think you guys nailed out the streamers. We should probably transition over with the crowd cheer here. Let's transition to the IDP side of the house. JT, I'm going to kick it off to you, but I'm going to ask a question real quick. For the audience that can't see my screen, for those on Google, Apple Podcasts, welcome in. For those on iHeartRadio, welcome in. Those on Spotify, welcome in. Those on YouTube, you're in for a treat. I'm talking to JT Brew. I'm talking to Jamie Perogue. We're talking about streamers. We're about to kick the defensive side. JT and Jorge Edwards have this awesome show. It's called the Stew with JT Brew. And he also does NFL betting, this podcast. I have it on screen. JT, I know you're going to talk about streamers. I was just a question from you I was going to ask you, but if people tuned into you guys' show, what would they see? What would they expect from you guys on that show?
So on the Stew with JT Brew, during the season, I basically do a college betting show on Tuesday nights, and then I do an NFL betting show. I do a college betting show with my buddy Benny D. Then the NFL show I just do by myself, and I basically give you my favorite plays, my favorite parlays, touchdown parlays, favorite teaser. I just give you more like individual bets I kind of like, and I'll go through some of the games. But that's usually what I'll do during the week on the Stew with JT Brew. And then Wednesday nights, the late night show, usually about 10:30 Eastern. Me and Jorge do Shoot the Gap, which is the IDP show on Fantasy and Frames. So we usually get together, do IDP on that one. And then our hockey show is typically on Tuesday nights on Fantasy and Frames as well. And then me and Johnny McGlynn get in. We do a day show. It's never consistent because it's always whenever his work schedule works out, because he has a crazy work schedule, and so do I sometimes. So we usually do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday during the day. We'll just do a breakdown of what happened last week, what's kind of coming up in the week, and talk about pickups, trades. We kind of go through a quick hitter on all 32 teams. So we did that this morning. So you can always go back and check that out. And that's the Dynasty evaluation podcast, and we do that on Fantasy and Frames as well. You can go to Fantasy and Frames, the YouTube page, the web page, all that stuff is broken down to each different show. So each of the different podcasts are on there. Watch it on YouTube, watch it on all the streaming platforms as well.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, I love Shoot the Gap. I'm always in there.
Jamie's great. He's always in there giving us questions, messing around, and then we got the late night show. So we had a little more leeway to kind of jack around and get off topic some if we want to, because we're the last show of the night. So we're not in such a time crunch as some of the other shows throughout the night on Wednesdays.
Well, that's an advantage. Yeah. So who do you have for streamers this week? I missed my waiver wire. What am I going to do? Can you help our audience out there? Take us home, JT.
Yeah, if you are somebody like me, I'm in a million leagues. I miss waivers all the time because I just don't.
Amen,
I
brother.
just don't get to certain leagues. I just don't have time. I can't get them. So I'm always waiting until after the waivers are up, and I'm just picking guys up off the the blind bid waivers, or just picking guys up and dumping them. So a couple guys down the list a little bit that have been playing pretty well, not highly owned in a lot of leagues. Arden Key from Tennessee, defensive end, outside linebacker. He's a guy that's been really kind of stepping it up lately. I was fading him earlier in the season, and on my IDP's plays and fades, I faded him a couple times, but he's actually starting to really kind of turn it up a little bit. So he's a guy not widely owned. So if you're looking for an edge rusher, he's a guy you can pick up. And if you need somebody inside, if you play on sleeper, you need a D lineman, or if you play in defensive tackle leagues on RSO or My Fantasy League, Danico Autry is the guy that's come back from injury.
Yeah.
He has been pretty solid for the Texans. So if you need a guy that can play defensive tackle, even with all the guys on the outside, the stars, he's still been really solid inside. He's a guy people kind of forget about.
If I may, just because I love both those takes. Two things those guys have in common, whether you're playing 0 tech, 1 tech, 3 tech, we'll get into all that, but they both play in the Titans, right? For my audience that can
Danico used to be on the Titans. He is now on the Texans.
That's what I meant to say, but but however they do it, they all, good catch. They all kind of line up, similar ways. They're interchangeable parts. I love players like that where I can get that DL LB hybrid. Don't get me started with that. But you know what's kind of cool with Arden Key? For the past, I'm going to say the last 2-3 weeks, I've had him in my waiver wire article over at the Six Pack. He's been hot the last 3 weeks. We keep telling owners about him. He's had 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles last 3 games. He's going up against the Chargers. They're giving up 2.6 sacks per game, even though they have good players on paper. He's had, I think, 9 sacks last 1.5 years with Tennessee. But the thing I wanted to land home with you guys is over at the Fantasy Six Pack, Joe Bond has this calculator. Well, shoot, I have it on the screen. I got Jamie's wide receiver cornerback matchup. I have my waiver wire article. I also have Joe Bond has this thing he does. It's called combined scoring. So we kind of put it in based on your scoring platform, whether it's Big 3 scoring, whether it's tackle premium, whether it's whatever. And one of the top matchups of the week is Arden Key. He's got sweet matchups against, the next couple weeks, he's got sweet matchups. You got the Jaguars, the Texans, the Commanders, the Bengals, the Colts. All of that sign me up for. And Arden Key's only owned 3% of leagues. And as you can tell, I'm kind of citing some of the stuff that you'll see on the Fantasy Six Pack. Shout out to Joe Bond. He's actually the number 1 ranker on Fantasy Pros right now. So if you guys see him, message him, give him a shout. I'm over here on my waiver wire article, and what I'm doing is I'm kind of just scrolling around, giving you guys some of the little bit of the sleepers that I came up with. But I love your Arden Key take. Who else did you have, JT?
Yeah, those were my kind of down linemen up front, him and Autry. Like I said, Autry's been pretty good inside. Is now the more pressure that Anderson and those guys and Daniil Hunter are getting on the outside. It's kind of opening things up for Autry on the inside. The other guys I like, you head back to like linebackers. I know we talked about him before. I know you sent out a tweet about it, but Jack Gibbons from Tennessee has been a guy that I've not been big on, but he is playing really solid this year. He's getting you tackles. He's playing a lot. So he's a guy and a guy that's kind of been a forgotten man that's actually been playing pretty well lately is Christian Roseboom for the Rams. So I know sometimes it's hard to find a linebacker out there. He's a guy that isn't, a huge name. He tended to play smaller snap percentages at the beginning of the year, but now with Troy Reader out, Roseboom's actually stepped up his snap percentage a lot. So Roseboom's he's a guy that I've been kind of grabbing and putting him in lineups where I have injuries or a guy that's on a bye week. I need an extra linebacker. Roseboom's a guy that I've been picking up. He's not going to probably score you a bunch of points, but he's got a decent floor. He's out there. He's going to get you some points, and he's been out there a decent amount. So he's a guy at linebacker that he's just not owned in a ton of leagues. And like I said, the name recognition isn't huge. So I think looking at Fantasy Pros, he's only owned in 3% of leagues on Fantasy Pros. And
I had him at 5, I think, on Sleeper, but 3 to 5, that's crazy. And Gibbons is only owned in 2. Isn't this nuts, JT, that you can get?
It is kind of wild.
I can't believe it. I think the tweet you're referring to with Jack Gibbons, for the second straight week, Jack Gibbons got 100% snaps. He's become the Titans' highest graded player. Coaching staff says they're in no hurry to get Jerome Baker in. He produced 14 tackles in week 9, and he's only missed 1 tackle on the season. Like, is this the Jack Gibbons that we all say sucks? What's going on here? That's what's so fun about
he's
IDP.
Playing so good. Like you said that, and you said he's only missed 1 tackle. And I was like, man, that is not the guy I remember watching on tape in the
Jamie's
past
head
couple
over there
years.
is exploding. That's the thing about IDP. 1 minute they're not so good, next minute they are. You just got to read the tea leaves and go, I like your Christian Rosenboom one. 5% of league zone, 3%, whatever it is. Regardless, you know what he is? He's 98% snaps. He's become the every down player that we thought Omar Spates was going to be, or maybe some people thought Jay Comer. But
it was Reader early on, and then he got hurt. Yeah. Everybody loved Spates in the preseason, so everybody went out there and grabbed Spates. I mean, Roseboom was just sitting there, and people were like, "Oh, he doesn't play that much," because they only play a lot. They play mostly one linebacker sets because they play a couple different safeties. But now that Reader's hurt, Roseboom's taken over, and everybody was just waiting all year for him to stop playing, and it's he just keeps getting more playing time.
And going back, this is the 3rd straight week at 10 tackles plus for him. Going back to Joe Bond's, versus the position, he's got sweet matchups coming up: the Dolphins, Patriots, Eagles. They're all going to want to at least attempt to run the football, So I don't see that changing anytime soon. I do see them maybe getting Omar a little more accoladed, but Rosenboom's your guy. Those are good picks.
And jumping back, if you want to look at DBs, a couple guys, that kind of been forgotten in the mix for some reason or another. Kenny Moore jumped back up last week as he got the defensive touchdown, 6 tackles for him, fumble recovery, defensive touchdown. He was a guy, banged up. And Colts, everybody else on the Colts was getting tackles but him, it seemed like, for a while. As Fantasy Pros only has at 9.7% of leagues, but he was a guy that, if you have to play a cornerback, that nickel slot, he plays that nickel slot. In the past, he was very playable, especially if you had to start a cornerback. He's a guy you wanted to play. And even if I'm in a couple DB only leagues, so you can play cornerback or safety. Obviously, you mostly want to play safeties, but he was good enough with the tackle percentages and playing in the box that he was worth playing. He just hasn't got the looks this year with Cross having so many tackles, Blackman, EJ Speed, Franklin, with those guys at one point, 3 of the 4 of those guys were top 5 or 6 in the entire league in tackles. They were just getting a million tackles, but Kenny Moore is a guy that you can go out there and probably pick up, as some people have kind of forgotten about him. And then the other guy that I like, that's not in a ton of leagues, I was kind of looking through it. It's a shocker because he's playing well, but I think people just have forgot about him because of the injuries. But Tyke Smith for Tampa Bay, 9 tackles last week, a pass defensed. He had a forced fumble. On Fantasy Pros, this seems crazy to me, but they have him on 1.3% of rosters. He's a guy that's been all over the place lately.
In the box too.
With the injuries and stuff. He's been good. He was out the week before, so this is where you maybe can get him if somebody dropped him, because he was playing really well a couple weeks in a row. He ended up getting hurt, missing 2 games in a row. Last week he came back, had a great game against KC. I think you're going to see the chance of getting the same thing against San Francisco. So if somebody dropped him or didn't pick him up because of the injuries, he's a nice guy that's probably out there and available in most leagues.
Love them all. I'm going to kick it back over here. I'm going to do it DLDB because I do a linebacker article. I'm going to kind of go into that. So I'm going to start with DLs. Dante Fowler Jr. only owned in 14% of leagues. The tweet I laid out earlier, I just thought this was kind of neat. Fowler's been DL5, depending on your scoring, but DL5 through weeks 5 through 8 when he started playing, according to Fantasy Pros. Last week, he had 2 sacks. That's not even included in that little statistic. So to put it all together, Dante Fowler 6.5 sacks on the season. He's only played 5 games. That's a guy you can probably get. Another guy I like Braden Fisk, the rookie. He's out there doing some good stuff. Only owned in 4% of leagues. You've seen Geno Smith this week running for his life. Career high pressure. I think he gave up 6 pressures, 61% of snap count. That's hovering. That's still kind of good. Looking at Joe Bond's calculator, he's got matchups against the Dolphins and the Patriots this week. So those are 2 vulnerable teams to the sack. I like those guys, and I'll give you one more for DL. I can't call it, JT. It's either Chauncey Golston of the Cowboys or Carl Lawson. It's going to be one of those guys. I'm going to go Golston here. He's owned in 5% of leagues. He's been monster tackle efficient for that team with 5 tackles, So, if you're that desperate and you're throwing this far deep, go ahead and get it. Jamie will tell you, and Jamie, feel free to chime in on these defensive backs. I'm not a defensive back guy, but I will say Trevor Mooring is forgotten about. It says owned in 26% of leagues, but he's always in every place I find him. He's always on somebody's waiver. Him and Alani Gilman are almost guaranteed guys I can plug in. Well, this year he's playing really good. So he's a shallow league candidate for waivers. Week 9 was another one of those weeks. He had 13 sacks. Here's a statistic. I don't know. Yeah, I did tweet this the other day. He's got 38 tackles in 4 weeks. Okay. By contrast, Budda Baker has 39 in 4 weeks. So he's putting up similar stats to Baker. So kudos to owners that actually waited like we're supposed to. JT, you mentioned Moore of the Colts. I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to go Jalen Jones, owned in 14% of leagues. The Colts. They got all them linebackers. They got all them defensive ends. They got Nick Cross out there. They got Blackman. They're going to have to go at those corners, right? Jones has been pretty steady analytical data-wise. I learned this for the audience that can't see my screen on Google or Google Podcast or iHeartRadio. Welcome in. Spotify as well. Jamie has this article called Wide Receiver Cornerback Matchups, and I'm taking this from Jamie's article. Jalen Jones's coverage grade, it's 72.7%. He's yet to be allowed a touchdown. The quarterback's only throwing 68.3% when targeted. Okay. That's pretty low for cornerbacks. Now, what makes this kind of interesting is I don't want the good corners. In this case, I do. I don't want the good corners because they don't get thrown on. Well, you got other people on the other side, so he's by default getting thrown on. He is a top 5 in passing defense, and he's got 52 tackles on the season, which ranks 10th. So the guy's still getting play. The guy's still getting on. And again, it's just one of those times when the number correlates the stat. You know what I mean? He's getting the tackles. He's being played, and he's top 5 in pass deflection. So if you're in leagues like that, like I'm in a best ball league that just so happens to do that, I'm getting 3 to 4 points per pass deflection. He's your guy. So I'm plugging him a lot of places at DB.
I think that's a great call, especially if you're in any league that you have to start just a cornerback or you get any kind of premium. Because again, it's not that he's playing bad this year. It's just he was pretty bad last year. And I think teams are still going after him. So it's like, even though his stats have actually been better, and he's actually played way better this year than he did last year, teams are still going at him. They're going at him like he's the rookie. They're going at him as the young guy. And so you're right. He's getting tackles. He's getting pass deflections. He's actually been a very solid producer in IDP leagues this year, where usually, you need a pick for a guy at a cornerback spot to really do much. He's a guy that's been in the mix all year. So he's another one. I love your Fowler call. In my IDP fades and plays article for 2 straight weeks, I had him as a play, and I usually never put a guy in 2 straight weeks in a row because I just try to not do that. But I was like, you got to go out and get him, and you got to play him because he's just been on fire. And if you actually looked at, if you go by Fantasy Pro scoring, he had a bad game against the Bears, but 3 out of the last 4, he has over 20 points in Fantasy Pro scoring. He was number 1, number 3, and number 4 in scoring for defensive linemen in 3 of the last 4 weeks. Like, he has been on fire.
On it.
He has been great, and it's amazing how much he's still out there. With a couple huge games he's had, he's still out there in a ton of leagues. So, man, go out there and grab Fowler for sure. And people forget about him because he's been around a long time. Dude was a first-round pick. Like, it's not like he doesn't have. It's not like he came out of nowhere. He kind of was a disappointment early in his career, but it's not like the guy doesn't have ability.
I think that position in general, they need a little more time to kind of develop. You know what I mean? Linebacker 2. So for my final category, I'm going to just talk about what I write over the RPO network. The RPO network, I'm blessed to be around great rankers. Leo, Master IDP, he's the number 1, number 2 IDP ranker. He's been number 1 the last 2 seasons. If you guys want to use promo code Hunter, you'll save $10 off full season access. The article that I write the injury, but I also write the every down linebacker. And for those that can see my screen, I kind of go in depth with players, and I kind of put all the percentages tackled. And then I kind of talk about the rotations that I'm interested in. You know what I mean? So I'm just going to lay, because, we did a good job this podcast talking about linebackers. I'm just going to lay a couple observations out. One of the things I noticed with the Miami Dolphins, where was David Long this week? I'm going to tell you, David Long got yanked. He got benched. He was healthy scratch, got benched, screwed over a lot of IDP managers. His pass coverage has not been up to par. So if you missed waivers and you're trying to stream, Anthony Walker may be out there. That might be something you guys can sneak in. You just might be able to sneak that in. So just keep that in mind, fantasy managers out there. And another name that we know, but maybe an owner got frustrated with Pete Warner. He's only owned in 6% of leagues. I don't know how. But his pass coverage is a bit spotty, but his career tackle rate's 8.7. That's on par with guys like Roquan Smith, guys like Pete Warner. I mean, he's on par with it, but he had an injury. My point was he had a hamstring injury week 5 through 7. So people may have forgot about the last 2 weeks he's had 17 tackles. So these are just players you can sneak. I don't think after next week people are going to be knowing. You're not going to be able to get the Sherwoods of the world, the Jack Gibbons of the world. Deion Henley might be out there in 5% of leagues. He's played 67 snaps and made 10 or more tackles. It's there for him. He's had great strong weeks. Again, maybe one more streamer for the audience. Maybe look at the Cleveland Browns backfield. Look at that linebacker core. JOK went to IR, right? He did. That opened up opportunities to other guys. Okay. How do you say this name, JT? Is it Mohamed Diabati? I don't want to jack the guy's name.
I actually butchered his name on the show last week. Diabate. Okay. He was one of my pickups at waiver wire moves and plays last week because of the injuries they've had at linebacker. He got in and played for JOK. He got some nice play, had a really good game 2 weeks ago. He's a guy that I think is going to see some solid time with all the injuries they have. Devin Bush for Cleveland had a decent game, but as a Steelers fan, I just can't do Devin Bush. It just kills me after he just fell apart for them. But yeah, I definitely think, if you're in a league, because I'm in a couple of leagues where they're pretty deep benches, and linebackers just get gobbled up at the beginning of the year. Once you're past week 3, like there is just no startable linebackers left on waivers. Everybody gets them and stashes them because of injuries and bye weeks and stuff. So he's one of those guys I told everybody, like, go out and get him because a lot of people aren't going to know his name. Like you and me, no one can pronounce it because no one knows who he is. So those are the best guys to go get because no one's going to be looking for him. They don't know how to type his name in to look for him on search bar. So like he's a guy, go out, do what I do, go put it on the team thing, go Cleveland, go linebacker. So you don't have to type his name and look for him and then just go grab him off the list there. But he's a guy that you're going to get pretty good production of, especially if you have some of those guys that either have lost their starting role or are injured or like are losing snap share. And you need a guy to kind of fill in for a while here, making a run. Like he's one of the guys I'm saying go out and get.
So not only that, Devin Bush has been putting up stats too. And, Jamie was asking us offline. Hopefully Jamie will kind of tie us in with your football background too, with all these questions that maybe, fantasy owners that never played football know. But when you look at an offensive line, when you look at the, just offense and defense, we're more reactionary, right? That's not an old trend, a new trend. That's just what it is. We're reactionary. But when you look at an offensive line, you have your center, your guards, your tackles. The center, everything lines up at everything. He's got to ID the mic. Okay, what does that mean? ID the mic. When he IDs the mic, that's determining which way the pass coverage, the pass blocking is going to go, right? Now, generally, the Mike linebacker is what we covet in IDP. That's not necessarily true anymore because those guys take a lot of blocks. The weak side guys are making plays. They're covering tight ends, what have you. Am I right, JT? The strong side linebackers, not so much because the nickel, the dime packages these days. You don't see too many of those guys anymore. Thoughts there, JT?
Yeah, so this is where the game has changed over the last 10, 15 years. The weak side guy was your smallish guy who had some good speed, but wasn't maybe great at taking on blocks. And so you have the Mike who was, cleaning up, making all the tackles. You had your strong side guy. He was usually taking on the fullback, getting double teamed with a tight end. Now what everybody wants to do is they want their best, most athletic guy at the weak side linebacker. Because you want that guy to be able to cover space, cover it quick. You want to be able to run plays down from behind. You want to be able to blitz them in different circumstances and kind of keep him away from getting double teamed and blocked. So you want to get him on that weak side. So that's where the game has kind of switched a little bit. It was like that used to be, even when I grew up playing, like our weak side linebacker was like, okay, who's the kid who's too small to play D line, but maybe isn't fast enough to play safety, and so we put him at weak side inside linebacker. You know what I mean? But now if anybody, Colts, I always reference these guys a lot because I have Colts season tickets, but that's where Jack Leonard made his money, was that weak side linebacker just flying all over the place, making plays. So those are the guys that you really want. And again, it used to be the Mike linebacker. That was your guy. He was your Mike Singletary. He was the stud. He was the guy you want on your team. Now, a lot of those times, those guys are just filling gaps for you. And it's your other guys that are making plays.
In regards to the gaps, too, everything revolves in the center. So you have your center, right? And then everything between the center and the guard, those are your A gaps. Everything between your guards and your tackles are your C gaps. Everything outside is the D gaps. So you have your A gaps. You got your B gaps, you got your C gaps, and on the outside is your D gaps. So with everything the offense does, the defense is going to counteract that, right? So we got a lot of different things. We got a lot of things we do. We do techs, okay? So the tech position, if you have a guy over the center, Jamie, that would be your nose guard, your zero tech. That's pretty much where he's playing. And how they do this, all the odd numbers are going to be on the lineman. So you have your 1 techs over the guard, your 3 techs over the tackle, and so forth. Your 5 techs over the deep tech, right? So the guys in between, those are your even numbers. So the guy who's playing that hole will be the 2 tech. The guy who's playing the other hole would be your 4 techs. That's basically how I learned it. That's kind of how I did it when I was in school. The 3 tech lines up over the tackle. The 1 tech lines up over the guard. So say you have any of those inside shoulders of the lineman, those would be the opposite techs. But the even numbers play between the outside shoulder lineman or between the gaps. What's interesting here, though, when you talk about positions and trends and the way the NFL is going, that's not the only position one guy plays. You may have a guy who plays an A-gap 2 defender, A-gap 4 defender. You'll usually see 4 techs. 4 technique players are usually 3-4 linebackers. Generally, they'll play in the offensive tackles inside shoulders, usually. I don't know about you, JT. Personally, I'd rather a defensive tackle that plays a 3 tech. Or like Aaron Donald used to do, a little 5 tech. That's almost like a cheat code, a little defensive end type of position, rather than playing a 0 tech. I don't know. And then last but not least, you have 6 techs that line up on the side of the tight end. You think of guys like TJ Watt types, and then I guess the best way to describe a tech 5 would be a guy handing dirt like Nick Bosa. I don't know. Any thoughts there, JT?
Yeah. And you just want to, obviously most league teams in the NFL, they're going to run in a 4-3. The 4-2 with the nickel slot corner is really popular now. That used to be, a passing down only look, and now there's a lot of teams that's their full look. They're basically running a 4-2 with a slot corner all the time because the passing guys. For mine, fifth grade kids, fifth or eighth grade, we run a 4-4. And I do that just because I've got a lot of kids that are the same size. And so I can put some kids and then I can move the kids up front. I can put them in the A gaps. I can put them head up. I can put them outside. But then when I coached in high school, we had a lot of teams switch from running, I formation option to a lot of RPO looks. So we actually switched to a 3-3-5. And then there we need to have a stud at nose tackle, because he's got to really make sure that he has to get double teamed. That if they're not double teaming, he's blowing them up. And then you really need to have that middle linebacker a little bit different, because that guy's got to fill the gap. He's got to be come up on the run, and then you want your outside guys to be your super athletes. Same thing with me in the lower levels. I want my outside guys. So like I said, kind of switch of philosophy. It used to be you want all your studs on the inside, and then you kind of like from there you went there. It's kind of flipped. You want all your studs on the outside. So like when we went in and I started figuring out what kids, I had my best kids, and I'm looking at them and I'm like, instead of playing those guys at middle linebacker, which 15, 20 years ago they would have been, I made all my stud guys the outside backers. And then it made all my other guys the inside backers that were a little bit slower, maybe not quite as athletic, because you want the guys, especially younger levels, everybody wants to get the edges.
I was going to ask you that. How do you when
you want to get those guys that can go sideline to sideline?
I don't know, Jamie, you played Pee Wee football. I was always bigger kids. I played like junior varsity, high school, whatever. I didn't know how they size you up. Like, do you look at a certain height, weight, or characteristic and you plug them in those positions?
I do, but it also just depends on what kids we have. I try to just we had one gigantic kid on our team this year, so he was like my inside defensive tackle, but then I had a tiny kid right next to him. But that's because the kid was a scrapper and he could stay low and he could shoot the gap. So when teams were double teaming my huge kid at a defensive tackle, because everybody had a double team because he was a monster. So when they double teamed him, the other kid would shoot the gap in behind him, because he was a small kid. He's like 5'4", like 110 pounds, but he was a scrapper. He didn't mind contact. He would go in, play tough. So sometimes, those kids aren't the perfect size of what you want them and where you're at.
Right.
And so you just got to kind of figure out like kind of where to move them. So then I put, my most athletic kids at outside linebacker and free safety. Because then my free safety, I want him. We don't throw a lot at the younger levels. My team actually does throw a decent amount, but a lot of other teams don't. So I want him reading the quarterback and trying to get picks, or he's my savior. He's like, when everything hits the fan, he's the kid that's fast enough that can read it and just run and make the tackle, and maybe it is 10 yards downfield, but he's saving us from giving up a 50-yard touchdown. And so I want that kid that's got the athletic ability and speed and is good enough tackler that he can wrap a kid up and make sure we don't give up the long one.
Jamie, before we talk about the circus, which is Thursday Night Football, I'm not playing a single player. You guys can fight me on that. It's a circus. It's a mess. I can't call it. My rankings get skewed because of Thursday Night Football. Before you guys get into Thursday Night Football and bets, is there anything in this category? Is there anything you want to ask the coach while we got the coach in front of us? Any kind of stuff?
The question I was talking about, I was watching that TV show. It's actually with The Rock, called The Ballers. And I heard this little tidbit that any linebacker who runs like a 10-yard dash slower than 1.6 seconds, like the chance of them to succeed drops significantly. And is there any truth to that?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is, the big thing everybody wants to look at is the 40 time, right? That's what we all watch the combine. We watch the 40. The guys that run the crazy 40 is awesome. When you get those big linemen that run, a sub 540, where everybody's losing their mind because like, oh my God, that guy's 305 and he just ran a 4.75 40. While that's awesome, defensively, the number you really matters way, way more than that 40 time is that 10-yard split. So if you look at stuff when they do and they go back and look at the numbers, they'll show you a 10-yard split and a 40-yard split. That 10-yard split is what you really want, because that shows how explosive you are off the ball as a lineman or a linebacker and how quickly you can get to the play. Because two ways you get to a play fast. You just are really good. You get off the ball and have that explosion, or a combination of explosion plus reading, where you can read and react extremely quickly, which is you see is at the younger levels. If you literally take a video or you take a picture right as the ball snapped at a play, you'll see the younger kids standing still because they're surveying, their brain is trying to comprehend what they're looking at and what they're supposed to be doing. Where at the NFL level, if you're doing that, you're toast. You got to be moving. As soon as the ball is gone, you got to be going. You got to be either figuring out where the play's moving right, moving left, back, or forward. You cannot be standing still. And so that explosion, that 10-yard split is what you're really playing in. You're really playing in that 10-yard space. I don't know the percentage, but you got to be like higher than 80% of the game. You're playing in a 10-yard space. And so that's what those coaches on the defensive side, that's what they're looking at. Offensive guys, running backs, wide receivers, you want that 40 time because you want the guy that can hit the home run on the deep run. You know what I mean? You want to hit that 60-yard touchdown run or, the deep pass over the top. Defensive guys are very rarely running that far unless you're a cornerback. Are you literally really sprinting 40 yards? So that short space is what you really want. And the guys that can get in that 4.45 to 4.5 range are like, those are the guys are just athletic freaks. So you'll see the 1 to 10 yard split. And then a lot of times the broad jump is something that they'll look really hard at for the D lineman linebackers because that's showing your explosion in your legs. You're not running, you're not moving. That's your explosion. And so if you can jump a real long way without moving, that's showing how much strength and athleticism you have in your lower core. And so that's why people are always like, why would you check a broad jump? Who cares about jumping? It's an explosion measure for guys, just the same reason they do a vertical leap, which, obviously the vertical leap, it helps talk about your athleticism, and that's why it's big. They always talk about it with wide receivers and running backs. Hey, if this guy's got a 38-inch vertical leap or a 40-inch vertical leap, that shows how athletic the guy is. So that's a big factor for those linebackers. And so when I'm looking at guys, I don't really look at the 40 when I'm looking at defensive guys unless I'm looking at DBs. I want to see that 10-yard split.
Wow, that's some great insight coming from like a coaching mind. So awesome. So, hey, Steve.
What you got for that Thursday night football game, brother?
Before we hit Thursday, did you want me to do my offensive trends real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. This ain't really trends. It's just like my future trends. I got my crystal ball out, and I wanted to bring up some guys that you can probably buy low on. Right now, CJ Stroud, he's going to get Nico Collins returning. That's going to make a huge difference. Josh Jacobs right now is a good opportunity to buy low on him. Packers are on a bye week. And they have Seattle, New Orleans, Minnesota for the fantasy playoffs. So on his bye week, you can probably get him right now pretty cheap. People are down on Tyreek Hill. He's averaging 11 points per game. He's currently wide receiver 31. He only caught 1 touchdown this season, but in the last 7 seasons, he averaged 7 touchdowns per season. So I can see a big jump in him coming up. So grab him now. Before he just starts exploding. Another one is Calvin Ridley. He's inconsistent, but the volume is there. And that schedule of Cincinnati, Indianapolis, and Jacksonville for the playoffs, that looks really nice for him, especially if he keeps getting these targets. One more is Mike Evans. Yeah, I know he's hurt now. So if you could afford to buy him and keep him on your bench until week 12, he's got a nice schedule with Dallas and Carolina in week 16 and 17. So I'm looking, if I'm in a championship run, I'm looking to pick him up. And that's pretty much it.
Heck yeah. Dude, we threw so many players at the audience this episode. I'm so glad to have you guys do this with me. One thing I'm not really comfortable with is the betting side, and I'm glad I have 2 powerhouses in that. What do you guys got for Thursday night football?
So we got the Ravens and the Bengals, right? The over-under 53.5, which is pretty high over-under, but I think that's coming from their week 5. It was 41-38. That shootout game, like that explains that high total. So when I looked at the betting, I was looking at the Bengals defense. They ranked 30th in rush EPA, which is expected points against. And now they're facing one of the top running games, right? The Ravens defense, they ranked 29th in pass EPA. Now they're facing elite Jamar Chase. So my props, you can't really run on the Ravens. So I'm taking Chase Brown under 58.5 rushing yards. I know he rushed for 120 yards on 27 carries last week. That was his first game without Zach Moss, but they're also playing a weak Raiders run defense. This week it's going to be a lot easier for that defense just to shut down the running back. And they also, it's a, what was it? Chase Brown over 22.5 receiving yards. I prefer to bump it up to the 25 plus yards because it gives you a plus odds. But the Ravens, they allow the fourth most receiving yards to running backs. Plus, I think it'll probably be like more of a negative game script for the Bengals. So they're going to have to use Chase Brown in the passing game. Let's see, what else did I have? Mark Andrews, I'm taking his over on 43.5 receiving yards. You got Isaiah Likely. He's missing the game, right? So there's going to get more snaps for Andrews. I think the Bengals allowed like 525 receiving yards to tight ends this year, which is like the 7th in the league. They also had the 7th
most. That's crazy numbers right there.
Yeah, they have the 7th most receptions to the tight end position. So you can see why that could be a strong play. Real quick, Derrick Henry, his line's over 93.5 against one of the weakest run defenses. That seems like a safe play. And obviously, if you want to throw that touchdown in there, Derrick Henry is always going to get a touchdown, but the odds are only minus 235. So you're not getting many odds. So I would just like throw that into a parlay just to up the odds. And let's see what else. Joe Burrow, his passing is 270.5. I don't think he's going to get there. So I'm only going to that 225 plus. It adds to my parlay because it's like minus 390 odds. So that'll just increase the payout if you add it to a parlay. So JT, what do you got? What do you
I'm right on line with you on a lot of those. So I'm the same way. I'm taking the Derrick Henry touchdown, but I'm putting that in my same game parlay. I'm a big Thursday night guy that I just like to put the same game parlay in. I like to, I want to get a bunch of different ones. I want to move the lines a little bit to where I like them. I like that. I would not pay the juice on the minus 235 to 280, depending on what you're looking at, but I like it in a parlay. If you're going to put it in the parlay, I do like, if you're looking for other touchdown guys in this game, I like Zay Flowers. I like Jamar Chase. If you're going to score on the Ravens, it's been passing. It's been throwing the football. Zay's been good lately in this parlay too, or if you want the points, depending on again, I do think the Ravens win this one. Depending on where you can get it, it's been like -6, -6.5. If you can get it before it gets to 7, I think if you wait till game time, it might get to 7. But I do like the Ravens to cover that against the Bengals. The other one, Lamar Jackson over passing yards, you can get right now, just because I have it pulled up. FanDuel in a same game parlay, you can get over 225 passing yards for -154 in a same game parlay. He's hammered that number the last was it 1, 2, 3, 4 last 5 weeks. His lowest passing output is 280. So 5 weeks in a row, he's thrown for 280 plus. So if you want to go low at 225, just to make sure you're golden, you can even get up to 250. If you switch it from 225 to 250, you can get it plus 134, and that cranks the same game parlay. I mean, it really moves that up because you're putting that plus number in there. I like that. Passing touchdowns. He's been all over 2 or more every week. Again, he's been on fire. So if you want to jump on 2 passing touchdowns or more in that same game parlay, I love that. I love your Chase Brown call. I was all over Chase Brown last week. I was like, take the rushing yards, take the receiving yards. I'm like, take the rushing plus receiving over 100. I was like, hammer it because I just loved him last week. Again, that's not how you beat the Ravens, is running the ball. You got to pass. I like the over receiving yards like you had. I think that's a good one to throw in there. Those are the ones I'm kind of like. If you get crazy in there, and like I like the Burrow. I don't think he hits the normal over under, but I think if you take like the 225, it's a good look there. If you get anything kind of in that range where you're taking like 5.5 or 6. For the Ravens, you take Flowers touchdown, Jamar Chase, I should say, because Chase Brown, don't want to confuse guys. Take Zay Flowers, Jamar Chase, and Henry at anytime touchdown. Then you take Lamar like 250 passing yards. You get the Chase Brown over 25 plus receiving yards. If you get in any of that area, I mean, you're now you're in the upwards of like plus 4,000. Like if you add those all together, you can really crank that sucker. Anybody that gets on in my Twitter page at JT Orange, I always put in my JT Parlay play of the day. Anybody that follows that knows it's a crazy one. Everyone's like, "Oh, you don't hit those very often." I'm like, "That's what I do. They're a crazy one. I'm looking for a monster payout on these things, so they're always like plus 2,000, plus 3,000, plus 4,000." So I'm with you on those ones. I think you can throw those together. And then I always tell people, if you don't want to jump on the huge parlay like that, where it's like 6, 7 legs, which is understandable because those are very hard to hit, take your favorite 2 or 3. Like your favorite 2 or 3 legs and throw those together. Make it a real nice when I do it that way.
Like when I put together a 6, 7, 8 leg parlay, I always take the alternate unders or overs.
So always taking the alternate. Yep, I'm always moving the line down because again, it's hard to hit the parlay, but you want to move stuff in your favor. You want to go in and get in the same way. Take the 25 over. Like I said, instead of like taking the 278 Burrow passing yards, throw it in the same game parlay and take plus 225. It was like you would never want to take that by itself because the payout is awful. You're paying a ton of juice for that. But once you add those extra legs in, it really cranks it up. And that's what I'm saying. If you get, you're taking all those numbers down, and then you're taking Lamar at like 250 plus passing yards, that plus 134 is going to crank it. Because all you got to, if you add 1 plus to the mix to all the minuses that you move down, it fires that thing up there big time. So I think a lot of people don't realize that too. If you could find one that you really like that's in the positive, you can move everything down and pay that extra juice, make it minus 150, make it minus 200, minus 220, and then add one of those nice legs that you really like. That will really crank that odds up.
Yeah. So I put together a 5 leg and it came out to plus 425. So I took the Ravens money line. I took Mark Andrews 40 plus, even though his line was at 42.5. You know how Vegas is, man. He'll get 41 just so he doesn't hit that. So I took the 40 plus, Derrick Henry 80 plus, and Jamar Chase 50 plus. And those the Chase Brown under the 58.5. So all 5 of those are at plus 425. I took a boost on it. 50% boost, it brought it up to 638.
Yeah, that's nice. Fantastic. Like I've got on FanDuel right now, I've got a 7-legger. If you want to get crazy, it's Ravens minus 5.5. Derrick Henry anytime touchdown, Jamar Chase anytime touchdown, Zay Flowers anytime touchdown, Burrow over 225 passing yards, Lamar over 250 passing yards, and Jamar Chase 25 plus receiving yards. I don't have the Lamar touchdowns in there, but I could throw those in there. Right now, if I do that, that is plus 5,469. So wow. $10 wins you almost $550 on a $10 bet. $100 bet wins you $5,469. So, like I said, I like to take these long ones, the kind of crazy ones, and then obviously I can take a boost on that, do it for like $20. 15, 20 bucks and crank that sucker up to about 6,500. So
the only thing I can really add as far as like IDP or even props in general, I was just thinking about this when you guys were talking. I know Mike McDonald, he was the Ravens former coach. He's over at the Seahawks. I've been kind of interested. I've been kind of watching that scheme. You may see some of this for Thursday night. You just might see, because the remnants of that defense is still there. Here's what to maybe sort of expect when you're seeing the Seahawks, but definitely the Ravens. Okay, Thursday Night Football. This is more of a 3-4 alignment type of thing, but they have 2 rushers. They have they call them the rush on the one edge, and they have a Sam on the other. The Sam linebacker aligns wherever the tight end is. And something we didn't talk about this episode, Jamie, JT, we talked about these tech positions. they also shade these guys which way they want them to go. So their nose tackle, their nose guard type of player, he'll go towards the tight end, which will create a whole bunch of blocking mismatches over here. Just the scheme they run, because what they want to do is they're trying to get that rush defensive end on a one-on-one or maybe even an open matchup. So just something that I wanted to throw in there, maybe let the audience know, whatever, if that's something to look for when you're watching this coaching tree, something to look for when you're looking at the Seahawks and maybe the Ravens. Maybe we'll see some of these kind of setups, with the Sam and the Rush players. But that's all I have this episode. You guys have anything else?
If you can get, so it's really iffy, hit and miss. Since I do a lot of the IDP stuff, I do try to go through the IDP tackles, sacks, stuff like that. The only issue is a lot of the books are real iffy on there if they'll let you put those on any kind of parlay. Some weeks they will, some weeks they block them. It really depends on the game. I think they let you throw them a little more on Sundays when there's a lot more games going. But there's a lot of times they'll tend to block those where you can pick them. But as soon as you go to try to parlay them with something else, they're like, nope, can't put those bets together. So I do try to get in some of those bets like assist, tackles, sacks. But it really, really depends on the week. And I'm one of those guys, I have to really love something. Like if I'm just going to take like a minus 110 or minus 120, just straight up bet. Like that's just not the way I roll with my betting. I'm more of a 2-pick parlay or a 3-pick parlay guy. I want to up those odds because I don't want to, I'd rather put in a bunch of different parlay legs of a, 10 or 12 games where I'm taking 3 or 4 pick parlays as opposed to me take 12 games and put money on 12 separate games. Now, I have a buddy who tells me I'm an idiot. I should do it all the time because he's like, you hit such a good percentage. Like, you should just be doing that. But I'm just one of those people, I don't want to put a ton of money out there every week, just across the board because I'm not a professional gambler. I do this thing for a hobby. I've done it for a long time. But that's, I'm not taking, I know guys that are putting down 500 bets a weekend. That's not me. I'm putting 5 bets a weekend, but I'm doing usually parlays and things like that. So I just always tell people, like, just look at those things. If you don't feel comfortable with the parlay, taking the huge odds, like look at it and pick the one thing you really like. If you like Lamar over passing yards, just take Lamar over passing yards. But, I'm a big one that I like to take at least 2. And if I can, a third and put them together. Because I always think if you can move that line just a little bit and make it like a 3-pick parlay where it's like plus 175 or plus 200, as opposed to a minus 110 on a 1-pick thing, and I can move the lines a little bit, I always feel better about that. But that's just kind of my personal philosophy when I'm looking at stuff, when I'm looking at sports gambling.
Yeah, another cheat code to do, like if you're doing that 2-leg, 3-leg parlay, if it's at a plus 200, like for tomorrow night game, it's 53.5 over, right? So if you go to the alternate lines, you could take the over of 40.5. and it's at minus 548. But when you add it to that 3 legs that you're doing, it does jump up the odds a lot. And most likely it's going to be more than like 20 to, or it's going to hit.
Yeah, I love that. Like if you could get it to like 40 or 42, like, and take the over and then take, like, you say you like the Ravens, take the Ravens at like minus 3. And add those together. And then if you have like, you can just do that by them together. But if you like want like a touchdown parlay, like say you just love Derrick Henry, throw Derrick Henry in there, a touchdown parlay, or pick like one leg of a player prop, you like throw those together. And then you can get that sucker. You're moved the line a lot. You're getting much better of like where you think it's going to hit. And you can get it for like plus 120, plus 150, plus 200 in there. So that's definitely, I love that move too. I'm big onto that, especially when there's not a lot of games going. If it's like the Thursday night game or Sunday night game or a Monday night game, there's only one game. I do like to move those around to kind of give myself better odds and just put it on one nice bet there like that.
And even if you think the Ravens are going to win, you could even take Ravens plus 6.5. I know it's at minus 800. But like I said, adding it to that leg.
Yeah, I like a team like that. If you like the Ravens, I mean, even if you get the Ravens at like plus 3.5, like the chances of them losing by like a touchdown or more, And I'm always like, I don't know. There's a chance, NFL's the NFL. Anybody can be anybody, but like, I feel pretty good about that on the other way. So I like where your head's at on that one too, because I do think there's going to be points in this game, but man, that number is real high. And if we've learned anything, if you're in the mid 50s to high 50s in the NFL, you're having to score damn near every possession or all but like one or two to get to that number. Like, because if you get any kind of long drives going, even if they're scoring, you just don't get that many possessions a game to hit that many points unless you're getting like turnovers for touchdowns or just huge plays or getting you 40 yards, 50-yard touchdown scores. You just don't have enough time to get to those super high numbers in the pros. So, when it gets real high there, I like to move that number down and try to get over like a much lower number.
I love it.
Jamie, any closing thoughts?
No, as soon as we jump out of here, I'm going to go check out Shoot the Gap over on FantasyInFrames.
Yeah.
Going to go join them smart people over there and listen to what they got to say.
Just want to talk about two of our sponsors for this show. Check out the IDP Center. If you go over there and type in IDP Hunter, you get additional 10% off. They do custom league analysis. They have free leagues, money leagues. Go check them out on Discord as well. They have trade calculators. Another cool thing about this site, JT, is if you sign up with them, they do an analytics of your teams. Like they do a 12-page dynasty report. They do a youth report. And the calculator's worth it. The calculator's worth it in itself because they do it based on your scoring of your leagues. And
that's a tough thing because I get questions all the time on like combined IDP leagues, like how to trade what guys are worth, and it's like the values are so different depending on your scoring and how your team views guys, and it can be very difficult to like really figure out what is a realistic trade per league. So that is a pretty cool feature.
We also got Brainy Ballers. They do mini helmets. You see my little mini IDP Hunter one. I really love this thing.
That's freaking sweet.
If you type,
I love helmets. Now I'm jealous. I got to get a Stew With JT Brew helmet. How do I?
If you go over Brainy Ballers, you type in code IDP Hunter, you'll get additional 15% off. Really good guy. Really easy to
I knew there was
a
reason I came on this show.
Get on the old JT Brew helmet. Get yourself a Jamie Perogue big game. Big game helmet, right?
What's that promo code again, Steve, for the listeners?
It's IDP Hunter 15. You get an additional 15% off on Brainy Ballers custom mini helmets. Like I said, they have a lot of cool designs. They send you some decals. Really awesome. But yeah, guys.
Now I know what I'm doing later tonight. I know I'm going to have to check that out after all the shows I do tonight. I'm going to have to get on there and buy me something.
Yeah, God bless you. He's got one more show to do. You're going to be on Shoot the Gap.
Shoot the Gap here just shortly. It should be anytime now. Whenever I get off the show here and we're ready to set up, I should be anytime in the next 15 to probably 20 minutes. I should probably be jumping on Shoot the Gap.
And that just brought me to my final question. I appreciate you guys. Appreciate your friendships. JT, besides Shoot the Gap and in the pocket, where else can the audience find you? What are you working on?
Yeah, so that's all the, Fantasy Frames where I'm all. You can usually find me on all the podcasts. I do writing as well. So I'd write the plays and fades that come out every week for IDP on FantasyInFrames.com. I always share that on my Twitter X page as well. But I do also write Dynasty Risers and Fallers article for Fantrax every week, where I just pick out like 3 risers, 3 fallers, guys I feel like are moving up in value or down. Tell you, hey, maybe look at selling this guy. This guy is getting cheap. I still like him, even though he's falling in value. Go grab him. So I'll do that. And then I do write for DLF. So I do my top 150 rankings for IDPs on there. So you can go over there, look at my IDP rankings, my rookie rankings for IDP as well. And then I do articles throughout the year. The one I've got coming out this week is fantasy, not IDP, but regular fantasy football rookies. So I'm looking ahead to the 2025 draft and who do I like first through second round, 1 through 12, and then 2-1 through 2-12 guys to keep an eye out as the real NFL draft comes, and guys you need to have an eye on for your rookie draft. So I got that article coming out this week. And then once the season's over and done with, I do a lot of draft work for Dynasty League Football. I'm over there. I'm writing all kinds of player profile articles on rookies. I love college football. I'm heavy into C2C and Devi and CFF. So I write a lot of articles about that stuff, about the draft, about the combine. I only live about an hour and a half from where the combine is every year. So I try to get over there and watch as much as I can at the combine and do articles about those guys. So off season, I write a ton of stuff all about the NFL draft and what's coming up. And there you'll see my IDP stuff plus my regular, running backs, quarterbacks, wide receiver rankings, and all that stuff.
We'll have to see you at the Expo next year, me and Jamie, right?
I'm sorry I missed it this year. I'm pumped to try to get there. Last year, the football game, the Expo was on my very first game of the year for football this year. And I was like, I can't not be there for the first game of the season. So that's why I wasn't able to make it this year. But hopefully I'm going to be able to get there this next year.
Jamie, closing thoughts and where the audience can find you.
Yeah, this has been an awesome show, man. Thank you, JT.
Thank you, JT.
Love having you on. Hope to see you again soon. You can find me on Going for Two every Tuesday night on the cheat sheet. Sunday mornings, Start Sit Show. Doing my article over at Fantasy Six Pack for the receivers, first cornerbacks.
All right, and that'll conclude the podcast. I keep telling everybody, you guys keep watching these. We'll keep making them. Until next week, talk hard.